committee meeting to order, dated Thursday, January 21st, 2010. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ingersoll?
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Mr. Farnham?
Here.
Mrs. Griffin?
Present.
President Guidry?
Here.
Mr. Hassan?
Here.
Mr. Landry? Dr. Mackey? Mr. McMillan?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Spell?
Here.
Mr. Stelly?
Here.
Mr. Sias?
Present.
Mr. Trimmy is in Washington, D.C. this evening. Chairman Brame.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll go to item 3. We'll receive a report and presentation from staff with reference to the following 2 items to be considered by the committee for recommendation. Item 3.1, jail is basically a jailhouse and maintenance tax renewal and increase. And bullet 3.2 would be for approval of a replacement of a 1.5-cent tax. At this time, I'll ask Mr. McMurray to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These 2 taxes certainly are not new to either you as members of the police jury or the public. The first one is a tax that has been collected now since 1988. It is one of the 2 propositions that was placed on the ballot in November and was defeated. It has been brought down to 5.75 mills. That tax was put on the ballot at 6.25 because of the big bond issue that accompanied it, but there's no bond issue that's coming back on the agenda for right now. This is just the maintenance tax. Brian's going to explain that in pretty good detail here in a minute. The second one is the 1.5% sales tax that's currently levied throughout the unincorporated area in wards 2 through 8. Currently authorized. We levy 1.25% of that, and this is an opportunity to put this on the ballot as a replacement for the last 21 months of that tax if this would pass. But, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd turn it over to Brian for a PowerPoint and an explanation.
Yes. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll wait for Tom to go ahead and switch it over. And you have a handout, and some of these are going to be a little easier to read. If you can on the screen, everything's in your handout, so whichever way you want to do it. Let me go ahead and start on the courthouse and jail maintenance tax, and we'll give a quick background on this. Originally, back in 1987, this was passed at 3.5 mills, and this was in conjunction with a big capital improvements program, which, of course, passed at that time. It was very big and included new correctional center, judicial center, and the old courthouse restoration, which was, of course, there's a lot of offices there, such as registrar of voters, sheriff's, civil division, so forth. So it was a companion tax originally. If you're going to have something new, you really need to maintain it, and that was the basis of that. If you go forward 10 years when it was renewed at 3.5 mills, it actually had been 4.0 mills the year before, so in that renewal, it actually was a tax cut to keep that low because we felt at the time there were sufficient proceeds, so it was at 3.5 mills, again, for another 10-year period. Fast forward to 2007, of course, y'all will recall at the time we mentioned that things had changed a bit. Proceeds weren't as good as they used to be. We actually were underfunded with this particular tax. However, we also knew we had some other capital needs. It's about another 20-year period since the last one, and we felt it was prudent just to go ahead and ask you for a 3-year renewal at that time, and this would have been at 3.46 mills, knowing we were going to come back, as you did, in late 2009 with the bond issue and, again, a companion tax. So that's why it was a 3-year period as opposed to a 10. And then the following year, during this waiting period, if you will, for the bond issue and so forth, there was a reassessment year, so it was rolled back. Y'all chose to roll all your taxes back, not just this one, in 2008. So that's the history of the tax, and it shows a very clear direction to keep this tax as low as you can for as long as you can. And you've gotten a lot of mileage out of that, and it's just become a time where it's insufficient for the current needs we have. Proceeds of this tax go into the general fund. It is not a separate, dedicated tax in that sense. It goes with other revenues into the general fund, and it pays for several things, and I'm just going to highlight a few of these here. Mainly, it's related to, when we say the courthouse complex and correctional center, we're talking about things like basic maintenance, any equipment related, materials and supplies, insurance for buildings, the utility cost, anything you can think of, custodial, to run these buildings. And as a reminder, as we covered this back during the bond issue last fall, these are statutory required costs that you must bear in providing these services. So this isn't something you can just choose to do or not to do. Parishes are statutorily obligated for that. And of course, it also includes feeding of prisoners and medical care for prisoners out at the correctional center. When we say courthouse and jail, what are we really talking about? It's a lot of different buildings in this complex and where the sheriff is out on Broad, and it's this building, the Calcasieu Courthouse, which is the old courthouse, 1912, the Judicial Center, the current courthouse basically, the DA building, 901 Lakeshore, of course, since you purchased it, and basically been operating it since earlier in '09. The Magnolia building, what we call the facility management building, which is a little off, couple of blocks over, but it's technically part of the complex. And then if you go to the correctional center side, of course, you're talking about the jail, but also the sheriff's administrative building. So that's a lot of buildings. It also includes the two buildings at the southwest corner here of Ryan and Gill, and anything in the complex basically is included in this tax. So with that in mind, just to set the background for you, this is the general fund graph. This is the trend. If you will look from the point where we said back in '07 for collections in '08 through this current year, we felt at the time, we knew at the time we had insufficient funds to pay for the needs of this tax, and that we were going to basically be kind of sucking it up for a few years, and hopefully we were going to pass this tax last fall. Well, this is when you kind of wish you weren't right. But this is what's been happening with the general fund, and that's a fund balance. So when that's going down, that's not a good thing, and we need to stabilize that and try to get more on an even track. So that, again, this is the whole general fund, not just courthouse and jail, but courthouse and jail is a part of that. So getting down to the numbers, the current, when I say current, this is 2010. Tax revenues from this tax, which is currently 3.27 mils, is about $4.3 million annually. Our expenditures for all of those things I had in the earlier slide, the utilities and insurance and maintenance for all those buildings, is calculated at about $8.2 million a year. So we're about $3.9 million short. So what we're seeking to do is try to make most of that up through an additional levy here. Again, we restated the 2009 levy, which is our 2010 revenues, and that's your last year. You have no more levy right now. It's 3.27 mils. It's 4.3 million. We would be proposing to you on your agenda tonight an increase in that to 5.75 mils, which would bring in about 7.8 million, which is another $3.5 million, a difference of 2.48 mils. There are other revenues in the general fund, plus we are always looking to cut costs where we can. You get some natural increases in your property assessment. So we can make up the difference in other ways, but this mainly makes up the difference for that 3.9. And again, as Mark pointed out a minute ago, this is the exact same millage that was proposed last November if the bond issue hadn't passed, but this had passed. That $0.5 mil was for the new construction, but this is really putting it back on the ballot, if you will, but only for what we currently own. The police jury currently has to maintain statutorily, so no difference there. But I just wanted to restate that, go into a little more detail, and that becomes your difference. 2.48 mils is the difference. Last slide on this particular item. This is the impact if it were passed on the residences. And as you can see in the, and I'll just go to the next slide, the far left column is your residential evaluations at different levels to help any homeowners kind of get a sense of where they are and what they would pay. And you see the key thing is this far right side is the difference. For a $100,000 assessed value home, it's another $6.20 a year. $150,000 home, another $18.60 a year. So in the big picture, it's a very good, fair, if you will, value for what you get for that when you consider all the many number of buildings that have to be maintained, including the correctional center, which of course would be inclusive of the feeding of prisoners, continuing that, and also their medical costs. That's the courthouse and jail run through. What I was going to do is go ahead, as Mark pointed out, go ahead and walk through the other one, and of course take any questions you have. Mark and I or anybody else on the staff who's here to answer will cover those. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll go ahead and go to the...
Go right ahead.
Switching gears now, and I didn't point this out, I think everybody knows it. The courthouse and jail tax is a parish-wide property tax inclusive of all the cities, okay? The difference here, switching gears to the 1.5 cent sales tax now, this is a tax that would be in the unincorporated areas only, except for the Ward 1 area, which is Moss Bluff Gillis. So I'm kind of switching gears there. And of course, one's a property tax, one's a sales tax. Giving a little background on this particular tax, the 1.5 cent sales tax, originally passed and levied in '92, as I pointed out, for all unincorporated areas except Ward 1 for a 10-year period. At that time, 1% was dedicated to roads, 0.5% dedicated to solid waste collection and disposal. The summary here, if you really want to get down to what is this proposal, it's basically to fold back into the mix the solid waste, as well as roads, and keep that. The tax was renewed for 10 years in 2002. Now the difference was it was still authorized. Y'all approved authorization of this at 1.5%, but you agreed to levy it only at 1.25%. And the reason for that was because you had solid waste reserves built up to the point where we felt like we could actually pay for solid waste collection and disposal with those reserves, possibly up to a 10-year period. Didn't quite work out that way as long. That's why we're here tonight. But that was the intent. So again, you are showing that you showed in 2002 you wanted to try to save the taxpayers money. With that reduction in the levy, the 1.25 cent was dedicated all to roads. And so there's a little bit of a difference here tonight, and I'll get into that in a minute. But other than road improvements, there was a little bit, an amount of $250,000 a year that was basically matching funds for the rural transit program. That's the program under Randy Vincent's Department of Community Services. They get a little piece of that. They have been since this was renewed in 2002. In our proposal, we would say that propose that you would maintain that level for the rural transit system. As I pointed out, since 2002, the solid waste collection has been funded with reserves. Those will be depleted by the end of this year. We project that it will last pretty much through sometime in the fall. Y'all budgeted some gaming funds to make up the difference. You extended the solid waste contracts to get us through the end of 2010. So we're really okay for 2010. It's after that is when solid waste basically has no money to run on. So with the May 1st tax election, this would be a proposal to approve an election call for May 1st. If you want to keep solid waste going, basically after that, this is our proposal to keep that going and also keep the road program. Now, the 1.5%, our recommendation is to do that for a 10-year period, which would basically be a replacement tax. Again, as Mark pointed out, the current tax you have still is active. It doesn't expire until September of 2012 with the current levy, but it's only, again, for roads. You wouldn't have the solid waste funds. So our proposal is basically to say, let's replace that with basically a new tax for a 10-year period. Let's clean the slate and fund what you did back in '92, and let's just fold solid waste back in. And again, this wouldn't change any of the area. It would be wards 2 through 8 for the tax, unincorporated only. Ward 1 is still separate from this. In the case of solid waste, they pay a direct subscription fee for solid waste, and then they don't have the road tax that's in the rest of the wards. The reason we're continuing, in this case, to not add that on there is because it would actually violate the tax cap in accordance with state law. You can't just have an unlimited amount of sales taxes, even if the voters chose to. Now, you could get special legislation or something, but we really would be legally prohibited from doing that. So this doesn't change the area of the current tax. It replaces it in the same area. and it remains a 1.5 cent levy. The difference here is we really can't fund everything you would want to do, as y'all have expressed to us over the past years. We've discussed this. That is the roads and solid waste with just the 1.25 cent. It would take really the full 1.5. Our allocation projection would be that we would utilize 1.0% for roads and the other 0.5% for solid waste. Now, and you can see where that comes out to. That would amount to about $13 million a year for the road system. And any questions on that, by the way, Claude could answer those, or Alan. And solid waste would be about $6.5 million a year for a projected $19.5 million in sales taxes. Sales taxes are more volatile than property taxes. I can tell you that even at 1.5, if we were to continue at the current level of sales tax receipts for several years, that wouldn't cut it. Unfortunately, they've really gone down the last couple of months, but we are in a recession nationwide. It's hit us here. We feel we will come out of that, so we are being conservative, but we're also not completely sure that's even going to fund it. But if there's a thought that, well, could we get by with a 1.25 and still do solid waste and roads, the answer is really no. It would take a whole lot of increase in sales tax to do that. We just don't project that. Based on the volatility, if you will, of these sales taxes, our recommendation as part of this proposal is not to dedicate 1% for roads and 0.5 cent for solid waste. We did that in '92, but by just leaving it, that's our projection for what we would spend on that. But because you have to enter contracts for solid waste collection, you're obligated to pay that. And if we'd think it'd be smart to have the flexibility if you needed a little more to use that, but the idea would be to break it down according to the graph you're looking at. So what does that actually include when we say roads and when we say solid waste? Roads portion is very much like it is now. It's road overlays. In this case, Claude and Tim and the staff put some projections together that this would allow. You know, it's like any good investment. If you want to keep it maintained and the road's good, you have to overlay them every so often. After a lot of experience over the years with this, they've determined that you can have an average of a 13.5-year overlay cycle, which is good. That allows us to take that, what was a 1.25 cent, which would go down to 1. I don't think I explained that earlier. We actually would be cutting back, if you will, on the amount going to roads from 1.25 to 1 cent. So in order to do that, we got to spread that out a little better, and that's where the 13-year cycle comes in. It would continue to fund roadside drainage and some of the major road improvements y'all have come to expect and enjoy. For example, this past year, Pine Forest Road up in Ward 6 area was done, and the Red Davis-McAllister Road south of Lake Charles, those types of improvements. We feel like we can still do some of those with these monies. And it would also, under the proposal, include, if we were able to do these, and they have to be selected cases, but have utility extensions. Because as y'all are finding out, we're all finding out, when you do roads, especially in some of these urban areas that are at the metro edge of cities, if we're able to work with cities, and give you an example, McNeese Street or Cabina, it would be nice to be able to go ahead and extend water or sewer if it's there, even if it's just for a little stretch, so that we can have economic development. This is not to fund a sewer program. It would be to fund utility extensions that would go along with any road developments. And it would, again, it would allow you to do that. The solid waste portion would be a continuation of house-to-house collection, wards 2 through 8. And we also, based on a lot of your input over the last couple of years, there's a lot of demand. We've heard from you and citizens that it'd be nice to have a place to drop off something if people were willing to take it for things that are not eligible in the contract. Now, what that would be, we'd have to really get down to the detail over the next couple of months, obviously, but that would be the group of items we're talking about. Under our projections, we could do up to 2 of those. These are not little dinky, you know, half-acre things where you drop off. These would be nice drop-off centers, roughly 3 to 5 acres possibly, It would give you some options for people to bring things like bulky items, some maybe recyclables like cardboard. Y'all really have to help us figure that out, but we definitely want to put this in here in response to what y'all have been hearing from the public that they need this. So that would be included in the proposal. And that's for their, that's for the operation of up to 2 centers. We're trying to keep out of the tax as much as we can. Our proposal would be to actually use gaming funds or another source, but probably gaming, to construct those 2 centers if it was up to 2. And at the way we have it, it roughly would be about $300,000 each to construct. And again, depending on what you actually allow there, the operation would be part of this tax, but not the construction of the centers. So what's the result if this were to be passed? Let me give you good, this just updates everybody on the current sales tax rates. Let's quickly go through some of these. You can see the whole parish, everybody, every city, police jury, unincorporated areas, are all authorized to levy 9.25% today. What is being levied today is in the right column. You're currently at 9% in wards 2 through 8. Ward 1 has 9.25. City of Lake Charles has 9, but the reason they have authorization for 9.25 is because the voters, when they passed the bond issue for the city, they actually passed a tax, a sales tax they don't levy, and they're paying the bonds with gaming, the debt service. But if it goes away, they have to levy this tax to pay those bonds. So it's authorized but only levied at 9. And then every other municipality is at 9.25. If this election is approved by the police jury and put on the ballot and the voters pass it, it would basically take that unincorporated area of Ward 2 through 8 from 9% to 9.25%, which is really, you already have authorization to levy that. You just haven't been doing it. It's right in line with basically the rest of the parish. And it gets solid waste back in the game and allows them to have that. So the net effect is a 1/4 cent levy increase in this, but it's back to what it originally was, but it allows you to fund the solid waste. So that's really the difference. And I believe, is that the last slide? Yes. Okay, with that, I will go ahead and sit down, and whatever questions y'all may have, we'll
Yeah. Did any of yours have any questions or comments?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not a luxury tax, folks. It's a tax that's necessary to keep the lights burning, the roofs repaired, and those sort of things. It's a renewal. It's not a new tax. And I would encourage, as I know you will, endorse this presentation by Mr. Beam here this afternoon, and I would move that we receive report and put the tax issues back on the ballot.
Second.
Mr. Anderson, what we're going to do as a committee, we're going to take bullet 3.1 and 3.2 separately, since they're separate
Okay.
resolutions.
Fine.
So we'll go ahead
But
and
my
do that.
motion stands.
Yes, sir. Okay. Mr. Spell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions regarding the sales tax. Mr. McMurray, there are a lot of people that have kind of forgotten some of the history on why Ward 1 is not part of this program. Would you go ahead and maybe give a brief summary on why that is occurring and some of the background on that, please?
To some extent, maybe some people won't want to be reminded that, but it is probably worthwhile that we do this. In 1992, when the jury was putting together the package for the cent-and-a-half sales tax in the unincorporated area, we were in the process of putting together that package, and before it could actually appear on a police jury agenda, the school board adopted a resolution calling an election for a cent-and-a-half sales tax in Ward 1 for schools, for school construction, where all the other school bonding districts in the parish were funding their school bonds with ad valorem taxes. Well, that presented a dilemma for the parish because we're putting this plan together for an unincorporated area, 1.5 cent sales tax. So we had to go to special bond counsel, Fred Benton out of Baton Rouge, and there were some very complex election calls, resolutions that were adopted after an awful lot of legal work on how this could happen, and the jury then created two sales tax districts. Sales tax district 4A, which is the unincorporated areas of wards 2 through 8, and sales tax district 4B, which was the Ward 1, which is entirely unincorporated. In doing that, the police jury took those two districts that they created, and they put they adopted resolutions calling tax elections in both of those districts. They adopted some covenant resolutions that were adopted concurrent to the call of those elections that, again, were very complicated. An awful lot of legal work went into this, but the results of those were this, that if the 1.5 cent sales tax in District 4A in wards 2 through 8 passed, and if the 1.5 cent sales tax in District 4B, which is Ward 1, passed, and the school board tax didn't pass, then the covenant resolution of the jury was that the sales taxes and the purpose that those sales taxes were going to be utilized for would be dovetailed. They would be married together and become one. Pretty interesting set of legal documents that produced that. It was really, it was very unique. I doubt there's been another one like it anywhere in the state. I can tell you that one of the questions that kind of hung out there during that whole process was, what if they all pass? What if both those pass and the school board tax passes? If the school board tax passes with a few more votes and District 4B passes, do they get to levy theirs and we don't levy ours? I don't know that question was ever answered. There were some letters to the Attorney General, some responses back. As it turned out, it was moot because the parish's tax in 4B in Ward 1 failed. The school board tax in Ward 1 passed. So it was moot. There was no issue of whether the parish's tax would be levied in Ward 1, but the tax in 4A, which was wards 2 through 8, passed, and that's where we've been all this time. And of course, in 2002, it was put on in 4A for a renewal of that tax, taking solid waste out of it, because, as Brian said, the reserve had been built up in the first 10 years of the tax that was enough for us to continue to provide solid waste pickup. Part of the history that you may be wanting to have on the table here is that at some point during that first 10-year period, the parish made several overtures to school board representation from Ward 1 to attempt to try to develop a sharing of the taxes. One of the basis for those ideas, I know Jerry and I met. In fact, I think we met in your house one time. Yeah, we got school board members and some other citizens and everything. We met. Part of the basis for that was that when the taxes were placed on the ballot in '92, the estimates that and I've slept a few times, so if some of this is a little rusty, I apologize, but the estimated revenue stream from the tax in the Ward 1 area ended up being about, the estimated revenue stream before the tax was passed ended up being about half of what was actually being collected. So we got the idea, well my goodness, maybe Ward 1 could have its cake and eat it too. Because if we would go to the school board and they would agree to share that tax, which could have involved another vote of the people, but maybe with a reasonable chance of it passing, then both the parish and the school board would be generating from Ward 1 approximately what we had both estimated before the tax was ever put on the ballot in the first place. That was a bad idea from the school board's perspective, apparently, because they didn't want any part of that. So we had no opportunity to accomplish a dovetailing or a sharing of the tax from Ward 1, and, you know, that's where we find ourselves today. Does that
It does.
kind of cover the?
It does. Thank you, Mr. McMurray. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, a question to Mr. Smart. Mr. Smart, the exclusion of Ward 1 from this, what specifically, how does it affect the construction of our roads and drainage system in Ward 1 by that area not being included in this program?
Over the years, we have been able to take other monies from sources like State Transportation Fund and help Ward 1 out. And what it amounted to is Ward 1 is on a retarded scale as compared, you know, slower scale as compared to the rest of the parish. A lot of the residential roads are paved slower, and some of them still aren't paved. And they have some major parish road traffic problems that we haven't been able to resolve on North Perkins and Coffee Joe Miller area that are coming up that we wish we could have, you know, got ahead of, but they don't have enough money. But overall, you know, they've been adequate, but without some proper planning and their growth don't slow, they're going to have some real problems in the future.
So in your opinion, you would say that infrastructure funding is a little crippled by not being involved with this plan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I don't know, it shouldn't be any secret, but it's always been a goal of mine to get Ward 1 back into the fold. I do understand the complexities and obstacles involved with that. I have no misunderstandings about those obstacles. But it was my hope that as part of this renewal on the sales tax, that we could maybe try to change history a little bit and approach the school board with another proposal to, as Mr. McMurray stated, dovetail revenue so that Ward 1 could participate in this plan again with the rest of the parish. And because of that, I'm not sure that we have exhausted the opportunities to present that information to the school board. I do understand that we're wanting to put this on the May ballot. I, with the utmost respect, would ask my colleagues on this jury to consider maybe to delay this to the August ballot period to give staff time to come up with a proposal to present to the school board. And whether the school board accepts or rejects it, either way, then we proceed forward based on that notion. I understand that this is a very difficult thing to maneuver, but I would just ask my colleagues to consider that. And as always, I respect the opinion and decision of this body. And Mr. Chairman, I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mark, you want to address the jury?
A couple of potentially complicating factors there, Shannon. One is that my impression is, and I could stand to be corrected here, but my impression is the August ballot is not eligible. It's not an eligible ballot for a proposition. I think that's been confirmed by the Secretary of State. That is a first primary, both Democrat and Republican primary for the congressional races, I think. So it would have to wait until the October 2nd general election. I think the August thing is out. Now, if we go to the October 2nd general election, Police Jury has approved a one-year extension of the existing contract with Waste Management. The beauty of having this tax placed on the ballot to determine the voters' wishes about it in May is to give time to put together the RFP that we would need to submit for contractors wanting to provide this service for the next 5 years, 10 years. Having an election on October 2nd could make it challenging at best, next to impossible, maybe at worst, to be able to have that RFP put together, responded to, have a company in place on January 1, assuming a new company, whether it's the existing company or new company, we would be looking for new cans. You're talking about roughly 30,000 cans would have to be delivered, and it could be really, really tough to do that. I'm not suggesting it can't happen. I'm just saying that is a real big challenge. An alternative, perhaps, would be, and this would really involve Mr. Smith, and probably I think we'd want to involve Jay Delafield as a bond counsel with some of the unique challenges here, would be to go forward with the May election. If it passes, then put together, try to do a plan. In the meantime, I think we could be working on the legality of that, but put together a set of covenants that could be put in place to where some kind of agreement with the school board would allow for this dovetailing to take place. The dovetailing could be it might end up being a limited dovetailing, because you've got people in 7 wards paying $1.50 toward these 2 services. Presumably, any dovetailing that would take place would involve a sharing of that tax in Ward 1. I don't know what jurors from other parts of the parish think about the idea there'd be less tax coming from that, less percentage tax coming from that area for the same service, or maybe the service wouldn't be exactly the same. Maybe there would be a proportionate reduction in that. Maybe a portion of the garbage fee would be paid and lower the subscription amount in Ward 1. Or maybe the road system wouldn't receive exactly the same level, because there could be a fairness quotient there about, people in one area of the parish paying half as much toward a particular set of services as everybody else. But there still could be a sharing that could provide at least some subsidy that is not in place today. I just think waiting until the fall could make it pretty tough to go forward with the RFP at the beginning of the year. And I guess you could always extend the contract again. So that's not an absolute negative toward what Mr. Spell is suggesting. I just felt like it needs to be said that could be very challenging to try to pull off.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Hassan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Mark pretty much touched on it, but just as clarification, when y'all tried to meet with Ward 1 School Board, that was mainly to have a sharing specifically for solid waste. Am I correct?
Well, it was to do pretty much what I just said. I don't know that it was strictly on solid waste, but it was to recognize that we were not going to probably be able to climb into the arrangement that we had before the taxes were voted on, but that we could, with the sharing, have some proportionate buy-in from Ward 1 into the both solid waste and road program that could be utilized where the need was there, realizing it may not pay for 100% of either of those 2 things as it was in the other 7 wards. It was a proportionate type sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Mr. Sias?
Yes, sir. It's kind of like 2 different questions. First one is like to Brian. On the courthouse and jail maintenance tax, when I was looking at it, it said that our proceeds that we collected went into the general fund. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so there, looking at that, I kind of was questioning that. Then I looked and see that there was a time that we was actually not putting in as much in the general fund for this. That's what we was taking out for the jail and maintenance tax. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, it's been...
They're looking like you said that there was more revenues, there was more expenditures. That's why we had to come back with a levy.
What we did with this, Mr. Sias, is we carved out, if you will, for the sake of explaining what this tax is used for, those items which it pays for. It's all in the general fund, but it includes basically the facility management department, and as we pointed out, all those costs on the slide. It's not technically a separate activity in the budget. It goes into the general fund, but that when you take all of those costs and see where they've been and what they amount to this year, which I think was about $8.2 million, it exceeds what the revenue comes in for just that courthouse and jail tax. So. it's been that way. Again, when I think it was back in '07 when Mark covered this, back when the 3-year renewal was done, we've been having to take money from the fund balance just to keep it paying for those services. So this is not new. It's actually been the case for at least 3 years. It continues. And so that it's just a continuation of the problem.
And what I'm saying, I'm leading up to is that, like you're saying, we are at the end of our 2007 renewal.
Yes.
And so I was kind of thinking about what my colleague was asking a while ago is that, in May, we are actually, what we're presenting to our people in May is Plan B. Am I correct? Because Plan A tax.
Compared to the Plan A in
Yes.
November, which tied that to the capital bond issue.
Yes.
That was at 6.25 mils, and
Right.
of course, that extra half mil was because if you had built a new pod on the jail, if you had built a new family and juvenile court, and you built a new parking garage, you would have had additional space to heat and cool and maintain, so we needed the extra half a mil to do that. Well, we're not building any of those things because the bond issue failed, so we can reduce that need back down to the actual need that we currently have for the buildings that we own and operate and maintain today, and that's 5.75 mils.
Right. And so, well, my point is that, and if, which we're hoping that it definitely doesn't fail, but if it does fail, we still have to go to Plan C before this millage runs out, right? And October would be a late date to try to.
I wish there were a Plan C.
Yes, I'm just saying, though. I'm just saying
Problem
if there
is-
was, but I'm saying October would be a late date to go to that. Whereas May, if we would have to, come back and come up with something else, we have a little bit more time.
October doesn't even work for this. That's different than the sales tax. On a sales tax, under the law, if a sales tax is approved, you have the authority to begin levying that tax after the approval on the first day of any of the quarters of the year. January 1st, April 1st, July 1st, October 1st. Ad valorem taxes, on the other hand, property taxes, you have to have the authorization to levy that tax prior to the fall, or the tax assessor is not able to get that tax on his rolls because he's got legal obligations to get to the Louisiana Tax Commission his tax rolls early in the fall for them to look over and approve. If we did not have an election for this until October, we would lose an entire year of authorized levy of this tax, which would put us down $7.5 or $8 million.
Yes.
Yeah, so that.
That's
Yeah,
what I
I
was.
mean, so the Plan C is not really much of a plan.
Yes, that's the point I was saying. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Size. Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McMurray, do you know how long this 1.5 cent sales tax to the school board, what is their levy? How much longer can they levy this in Ward 1? Do you know that?
Shannon may know better. I know it was originally passed at 15 years, and I'm under the impression in 1992, where ours was a 10-year tax, theirs was a 15-year tax. I'm under the impression that for some reason or other, and I don't know if I ever understood why, they renewed that early. And I don't know if the renewal was for an additional 15 years, but it would not add up to 30 because it was renewed before the 15 years was up and replaced. Is that correct?
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
If I may,
Spell.
Mr. Chairman, the expiration for the school board sales tax is September 30th, 2020. So it will be another decade before the school board sales tax is up for renewal.
Do you know how many more schools y'all building in Moss Bluff in 10?
That would be a question that would need to be addressed to our school board representative, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. I was just curious. That's some nice schools. I would say that the cons to extending this to October 2nd would really, to extend our contract for solid waste next year means we don't have no money to extend it. Am I correct to say that?
Well, that's correct.
Without this,
That's correct, but if you, in theory, if you pass the tax in October, you could begin to levy it, and the money would come in, and you would have the option to do that. My point a while ago was that it might be hard to really put together an RFP in that short of a time frame and make that work.
but we could extend the contract we have now, possibly. And I'm just, I'm trying to try to help Mr. Spell out here, and I would like to see us all back in the same pot. I like to mix all my food together on my plate. Tastes better that way. So I appreciate that, Mr. Spell. You know how much is that going to cost us if we extend it next year? Do you have that number with Waste Management? If you,
They have, my recollection is they have made an offer that if we were to extend it past the 1-year extension we're already in, that they would hold the current rate with nothing but a CPI adjustment. Does that sound right, Brian?
Yes, it's currently at $16.68 per household, and I think it could be a slight adjustment for that, some CPI and a fuel adjustment clause, which they have in there already. But I think it depends on the time period of the extension.
and my last statement, if you will. So if we don't pass this very soon or extend it, basically what we're saying is everybody in this parish that's using, in the unincorporated areas right now, that is using Waste Management is basically going to have to call them, get a subscription. Hey, can you come pick up my trash, and how much do I owe you? Is that kind of a fair assessment?
Close. I think you would have the ability, if it doesn't pass, to put an RFP out for a company to have a non-exclusive franchise, like is what is in Moss Bluff, and bid on what price they would charge for that, but then people would have to pay for it on a monthly or quarterly basis. So maybe I think every 4 months, I believe in Ward 1 is the way they bill. But they would be paying for it because there would be no money coming into the parish coffers to pay for any solid waste, and there would be no funding available for the drop-off centers that we're talking about placing in here. So it would be a pretty much of a quantum change from what the people in the wards 2 through 8 enjoy today. You wouldn't have to. You could do it the way you're talking about, where you could just kind of franchise any company that wanted to, and people could call them up and say, how much you gonna pick my waste up? But that gets pretty impractical, where you have these long stretches of road out in the unincorporated area. You may have one company picking up 2 cans here, and then you got another company picking up that 3rd can right next to those, and then you go back to the other company doing that. It could be pretty messy. I think you would want to try to, best you could, accommodate them by having some franchise with a company, not to prohibit someone else from doing it, but at least to franchise somebody that would have a bidded amount where people could contract with a single company. But again, they're writing the check for that service each month.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I can, one question for Mr. Smart.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Smart, when we talk about overlaying all these roads, I've heard I've seen it done, but they call it slurry. Is there a way to coat some of these roads to get some life out of them that's a little more economical than having to wait and just making sure we overlay them every 8-10 years, whatever we're doing? Is that a thought?
We have used it in the past, as well as other types of surface treatments, and the system that we have now is the one we prefer. But yes, sir, if we were to not pass this tax, we would be back revisiting some other means to extend the life, to hope one day in the future that people would pass it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smart. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shannon, I know your plight, and I'd like to see us do something, but not at the expense of what we're looking at trying to do to wait on what we really need to do for the entire parish. And I hope that we could open negotiations with the school board. I was watching the news the other night where they're in a $20 million deficit, and for them to come up with money with the parish might be something they might not want to do, but we can absolutely communicate with them and see what we can do to get everybody on the same page. And it's something I know you've been wanting to do for a long time, and I hope we could get it done. But at hand is what we've got to deal with, and this is what we got to do. I don't know how we can make this any prettier, because boy, it's hard to sell taxes right now. This is an absolute on the maintenance tax, that we have to have this to take care of the jails and take care of our facilities that we have. We've got to convey to the people how important this is to run government, and the way we run government is with taxes. So that's got to get out there, and they have to understand that we're doing the best we can on the budget we have to make sure all our facilities run well. Now, the other one on the sales tax for the trash pickup as well as working with the roads. We have some of the greatest roads anywhere. There's no parish in the 64 parishes that can compete with our roads that are in unincorporated areas that we have here in Calcasieu Parish. I'm very proud of that. And we, as a community and as a parish, need to make sure that we stay at that status. So we got to convey that to the people. The only thing I was looking at is I'm really excited about the possibility of the 2 collection sites, possibly doing one on the east side of the river and the west side of the river. How do we work, maybe as a jury, to get some type of covenant resolution that the people know that if they vote yes on this, that these sites will be built, that we'll take the $300,000 I heard out of maybe gaming fund, build one on the east side, build one on the west side, because so many people, we get kids moving in or get extra junk, you just need to haul something somewhere to haul it off. This would be great for our parish. We got to look at what plums we can put out there in a time that's hard to pass taxes to make sure that the people will pass these taxes. And that's what I'm kind of looking to the administrative staff to tell me, what can we do to make this thing really pass? We don't have a plan C coming. This is plan B with this not passing. We've got to make sure that the public knows the importance of both these issues passing. Mr. McMurray, if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Moore.
Kind of anticipating that could be the feeling of some members of the jury, that you would want to kind of have that guarantee in place, realizing that we've heard from a lot of y'all about the need for these drop-off centers. We've talked about constructing a covenant resolution that could be adopted by the police jury before the election, so that the people would have in hand that kind of guarantee. That those covenant resolutions are binding on current juries as well as future juries. So that could easily be handled with a covenant resolution that the drop-off centers would be, in fact, a guarantee, if that's your question.
Yeah. And what I see in this, and foreseeing these 2 sites, and maybe this jury does, or whatever, in some of the discussion we've had, that this doesn't become another eyesore for the parish. These sites are sites where folks can go and drop the construction debris or debris and trash that they have, and it'll be taken care of immediately. It won't be something that'll be a stench to a community that folks won't want these in their backyard. They'll be manned during the working hours and under surveillance during all 24 hours, so nobody be going up to these gates and leaving trash. It's something that we need, and we need to do first class, and I think it's something that the people could buy in on understanding the need of this vote, and something we could put out there for the folks to work with on that. With that being said, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. With no other discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Spell.
Mr. McMillan, I do appreciate your comments, and my heart is really for the entire parish, but Ward 1 is part of Calcasieu Parish. So for us to consider the needs of the entire parish, that is the purpose and goal behind what I'm looking for, is to try to resolve that situation. Understanding the complexities with the ballot dates, and just to clarify, the only thing I was looking at was delaying the sales tax, not the property tax. I'm supportive of putting that on the May ballot. But as an alternative, and realizing that we have a motion on the floor, after we take action on those items, I would like my colleagues to consider supporting a motion to request staff to look into those alternatives and report those alternatives back to the jury at our first regular meeting in March. But, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I will make that request after we take action on the motion on the floor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Spell. We do have a motion on the floor to accept the resolutions by Mr. Andrepont and a second by Mr. McMillan, but I would like to, Mr. Andrepont, would you mind making them separate motions?
That's not a problem. We can go with 3-1 first and then 3-2. That'd be
Okay,
fine.
I have a motion on 3-1 by
And a
Mr.
second.
Andrepont and a second by Mr. McMillan. Do we have any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. 3-2, same motion by Mr. Andrepont
Second.
and a second by Mr. McMillan. And do we have any discussion on bullet 3-2? Hearing none, motion carries. Mr. Spell?
Mr. Chairman, if I may make a motion to request staff to put together some information regarding proposals to approach the Calcasieu Parish School
Second.
Board and have them report that information back to the jury at our first regular meeting in March.
Discussion.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And I would ask Shannon, with no delay of what we just voted on, I mean, you're not looking at delaying any of the action we've just taken.
No,
It's
sir.
basically a report.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, go ahead.
No, sir, I didn't state any objection and voted in favor of both items 3.1 and 3.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Spell and a second by Mr. Scott. And do I have any discussion on that? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. And do we have any, we'll go to item 4 for any other matters for consideration? If not any, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, a motion and a second. We are adjourned.
The regular meeting of Thursday, January 21st, 2010 has now been called to order. Would you please stand? We're going to have the invocation by Mr. Fordham and the pledge also proceeding.
Heavenly Father, be with us tonight as we conduct our business. Touch us with your wisdom that we may make just decisions in your name. We ask this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Face the flag, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please call roll.
Yes, sir. Mr. Anderpont?
Here.
Mr. Frame?
It's still vacant.
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Mr. Farnham?
Here.
Mrs. Griffin?
Present.
Mr. Hassan?
Here.
Mr. Landry?
Here.
Dr. Mackey?
Present.
Mr. McMillan?
Here.
Mr. Scott? Here. Mr. Spell?
Here.
Mr. Stoney? Mr.
Here.
Stoney. Mr. Sias?
Present.
Mrs. Trimmy is in Washington for the Mardi Gras promotion. President Guidry? Present. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. For all of you that's out there that have pagers and any type of vibrating device, we'd ask that you would please put those devices to silence. And for those of you that want to speak on any of the items, there's blue slips in the back of the room. If you would fill those out and bring those to the front, Ms. Colleen would be more than happy to take those. Also, for those of you that's out there, we have a brand new seal that the parish has taken up that's directly behind me. Mr. McMurray wanted me to mention that to you all. It's beautiful. That's our new parish symbol right there. All right. At this time, we have a few people we want to recognize, but one gentleman I'd like to come to the mic and just have a few announcements just on comments with Mr. Joe Hill. Please come up and have a few comments on basically him being here today in the presence of us. State your name and position, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Joe Hill. I'm the new field representative for Congressman Bastani, and very grateful for the opportunity to come and say hello to you this evening and assure you of Representative Bastani's best wishes, and if we can be of any service to the police jury, please call on me.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. We do appreciate you coming. At this time, we will take up item number 5, presentation of plaque to Mr. Randy Daugherty in recognition of his heroic efforts in rescuing a homeowner from a structure fire in DeQuincy. This should be good. McMillan.
Tim, if you and Randy would come on to the microphone. As y'all may see that myself, I'm on crutches, as well as our president, Kevin Guidry, on crutches. We were basically going to be playing in a Nambi basketball game. We were going to be hometown heroes raising money for Nabi, and I got hurt in practice the Sunday before. I popped my Achilles tendon. Kevin was giving me a hard time, and I'll be darned if not on the second play of the game did he not pop his Achilles tendon. We both have had surgery. I had my surgery last Thursday, and Kevin had his surgery on Tuesday. And I can tell you, he's much more of a man I am, because 2 days after my surgery, I was still well in the pain pills, and I wouldn't have been at the police jury meeting. So, Mr. President, I'm very proud of what you've been here tonight and
thank you
conducting a meeting.
For some odd reason, if I doze off, I ask my vice president just to nudge me.
I tell you what, we've learned great lessons in life. Neither one, we're both now too old to play any kind of sports. Ping pong and golf is going to be it. I tell you, anytime you have a chance to honor someone in our parish, someone that's a true hero, someone that saves somebody's life, it's great that we have the parish and the CGov channel and the press here that we can bring these folks to the forefront. It's just a tremendous opportunity. I'm going to let Chief Gillum tell exactly what happened, and then we're going to present you, Randy, with a certificate of appreciation from the parish. Chief, if you would.
On November 6th, 2009, about 3:15 in the afternoon, of course, our fire department had got a call about a structure fire. And these were the events that led up prior to our arrival. Randy lives next door to the structure that was on fire. He was at home doing his business, and in fact just about to leave to go do something else when he happened to hear a lot of commotion taking place next door. A lot of horn blowing in a vehicle, someone hollering, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," and so he went to see what was taking place. On his investigation, he found, as he went around where he could see the house next door, he saw the smoke coming out of it, and went ahead and took it on himself to go on, make entry into that place, and rescue his next door neighbor, Mr. Rainwater. The things of it is where the fire was located was where this gentleman was at. It's just a miracle that Mr. Rainwater was alive today. And if it hadn't been for Randy being there, he would have died. He was inside the house all the way against the back wall on a couch. And when Randy made entry, kicked the door in, whatever it was he had to do to get in, and called out to him, the gentleman couldn't come to him, couldn't make his way out of the house, was in no shape to get out of the house for whatever reasons that they were, the smoke and so on. The fire department got there, that whole part of the house was completely involved with flames. So just in that few moments of time, had Randy not been there, that gentleman would have died. He definitely saved his life that day.
With that being said, I have a certificate of condemnation. Presented to the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury on this day, the 21st day of January 2010, to Mr. Randy Daugherty, in honor and recognition and appreciation of his heroic actions in the rescuing of a homeowner from a structure fire in the DeQuincy area on November 6, 2009, and for his unselfish reaching out to save a life of someone in peril. Now, actually, this was in Sandy's district, and Sandy was in Washington tonight, but on behalf of this entire jury, Miss Sandy Trimmy, and myself, congratulations. We'd like to hear a few words from you, if you would, Randy.
Appreciate it. I just did what I had to go do. I mean, I didn't know what else to do, to go in there, and the young lady pulled up in her daddy's truck, and she said my daddy was in there, so I just went in there and did what I had to do. That's about it.
Well, once more, thank you so much on behalf of all of us. We really appreciate it. God bless you.
We do appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Item number 6, presentation of plaque to Commandant John Lamar of West Cal, Al Worley, attachment 1157, U.S. Marine Corps League, in appreciation of his many services and contributions to the annual Toys for Tots program in Calcasieu Parish. Mr. Andrew Punt.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the jury. I know everyone in this room is well familiar with the Toys for Tots program. I wasn't involved with this program until just a few years ago, and let me assure you that It's just not picking up toys from point A and dropping them off at point B. There's a lot of activity that goes on behind the scenes. Hopefully this program reaches as many kids as we possibly can. I'd like to be able to stand up here and visit with you tonight and tell you that every kid has a Christmas, and I'm sure that that's not true, and no kid should have to go without having a Christmas. I have the privilege of having next to me tonight a man who has devoted a lot of hours, a lot of years, not because he feels like he has to, he does it because he wants to. He feels that these kids are more important than life itself. I didn't know John Lamar when I first started this program, but it's been an honor to work with you, my friend, since day one, and I mean that sincerely. I'd like to read this certificate of recognition, if I could, for just a moment. Presented by the Calcasieu Police Jury on this, the 21st day of January 2010, to Commandant John Lamar of West Cal, Al Worley, Detachment 1157, U.S. Marine Corps League, in recognition and appreciation for his many services and contributions to the annual Toys for Tots program in Calcasieu Parish. Congratulations on a job well done, and keep up the good work. John Lamar, folks.
First, I really want to thank the police jury because for about 5 years ago, this program was down to about 2,000 kids in Calcasieu Parish. And now this paperwork from the police jury office, we're up to 75,000 kids, 7,500 kids each year now. And also, one for the police jury, it wouldn't happen at this magnitude. Even I see Senator Mount sitting over there also. I'll be giving her calls, and she'll be helping out also. And also, every time I call one of the police jury, they're always here. And this is just not by John Lamar. I've been trying to stay out of the limelight, stay in the back, and let other people take the pictures and just do what I know that God called me to do. So right now, I want to introduce the new staff sergeant that's taken over Southwest Louisiana, not for Toys for Tots, but Toys for Tots is the Marine Corps. So Staff Sergeant Shaw, please.
I'd like to start off by saying thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for having me here today. Pretty much as John Lamar said, I'm the new station commander for southwestern part of Louisiana for the recruiting command down here. So it's a great pleasure to be involved with the Toys for Tots program because it is for the Marine Corps and it is for the community. And community service is a huge part of my life and the Marine Corps' life, as I feel. So again, thank you guys for having me, and for the next 2 to 3 years that I'm here, I hope to enjoy the community.
Thank you guys both for all your help. At this time, I would like to move to item number 15. Consideration of adopting a resolution of support and intent for the formation of a human service district, also known as a mental health district, for the Region 5 area of Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals in accordance with Act 373 of the 2008 regular session of the Louisiana State Legislature. At this time, I would like to, I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Collins. Is there any discussion? Any objection? At this time, I'd like to call Mr. Brian Beam to the mic.
Mr. President, if you would allow us, Senator Mount is actually here tonight to address this issue and explain it a little bit, if you'd like, before you want to finalize your vote on it.
Okay.
And then, if you have any questions, of course, she's here, and we appreciate, and I know she appreciates you moving it up. We also would ask that after that, if we could go to item 14. It somewhat involves her and some of the other folks from mental health, but very briefly, before I forget, I also wanted to tack on from Mr. Andrew Pont and the Marine Corps League. Thanks to Randy Vincent and OCS. They're a very big part of the Toys for Tots working with the Marine Corps and all of you, and I just want to thank him for that. Real quickly, before Senator Mount comes up, this Act 373, which you all have a copy of in front of you, was passed by the state legislature in 2008. and it, in very summarized terms, creates what they call mental health districts around the state. Some of them have already been created. And ultimately, what they need right now is a letter of support from each of the juries in the 5 parish area here. And I don't want to steal Senator Mout's thunder, but basically within about a month, we're going to ask that the jury appoint a member to that board to be established. And I think with that, I'll just ask Senator Mount to go ahead and cover the rest of the issue.
Please take the mic, Senator Mount.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all of you, and thank you for this opportunity. Mr. Beam did a very good job of introducing the subject matter and the LEG, or the local governing entity. We passed this particular act in 2008 as a House and Senate, and I'm really here representing the delegation, and I also chair Health and Welfare. So the group that I'm here with today, we're all working together, but we're very excited about the opportunity to focus on more of a local autonomy. So with your willingness as a police jury, along with the other 4 parishes, if all 5, and it is a requirement that all within the Region 5, all the police juries agree to support the concept, then we would take the next step, as Brian said, which would be to begin to work through the process of how we go about appointing someone. Each police jury in each parish would have 1 representative, a total of 5, and then we would have 3 appointed by the governor. But the 3 appointed by the governor have more specific descriptions, and 2, as the local leaders, you would have say or recommendations for the governor in that regard. So we would certainly like you to consider that. There are 4 other districts like what we're trying to do here already in the state. And the overall plan from the department is to, again, disseminate so that those decisions that need to be made can be made based on our area, which, you know, it's something we all talk about. And, of course, y'all being in local government and me teething on local government, it's something I really can get my hands and arms around, and I hope you will too. I'd like to also introduce Susan, if you'll come forward, who will give you maybe some more specifics, and then if you have questions for either of us, we're happy to answer those questions.
Please state your name and address for the record, ma'am.
Susan Fry. I'm at 4105 Kirkman Street. Good afternoon, Mr. President and members of the police jury. As I said, I'm Susan Fry, and I serve as the Regional Director for the Office of Mental Health. I'm here to speak to you today about Act 373 and to request that you consider joining this regional effort, transitioning from the authority of the Offices of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Addictive Disorders from the state to our local community. This involves initially signing a letter of intent that then goes to the Department of Health and Hospitals. Currently, the state offices of mental health, addictive disorders, and developmental disabilities are funded and under the authority of each state's office out of Baton Rouge. Act 373 mandates the change of the governing authority of these agencies from Baton Rouge to the local governing entity. Although these agencies frequently collaborate with each other, each has a specific role in the community. Office of Mental Health serves individuals diagnosed with serious mental illness and severe and emotional and behavioral problems. The Office for Addictive Disorders provides services to individuals with drug and or alcohol problems, and the Office for Developmental Disabilities provides services for individuals with developmental disabilities such as autism and mental retardation. These agencies are providing these services in the region that consists of Allen, Beauregard, Calcasieu, Cameron, and Jeff Davis Parish, as we already mentioned. Act 373 calls for the traditional state-operated regions to transform into integrated human service delivery systems with local management and accountability. This legislation allows the LGE to respond to the specific needs of our local community and more efficiently and effectively manage the local services rather than the decision-making occurring in Baton Rouge. The local governing board will consist of 1 person appointed by each police jury from the 5 parishes and 3 persons appointed by the governor. Each parish police jury will submit the names of 3 persons from which the governor will choose his appointments. There are currently 4 LGEs established in the eastern part of the state, and several of the other regions are in the process of establishing an LGE, such as the Lafayette Region 4 area, the Region 8 area, Monroe also. Board representatives should have an interest in the betterment and recovery of persons with disabilities and be able to commit volunteer time toward development of the local governing entity. Skills in business, organization, finance, law, or advocacy are desirable. The board is charged with establishing a mission, vision, and policies for the operation of the district, setting policy as a governing body, and employing an executive director who shall be accountable to the board as a body for the implementation of policies established by the board. So I'm asking you to please consider a threefold request. 1, to sign a letter of intent within 30 days to participate in the formation of this local government entity. 2, to appoint 1 resident of the parish to the future local governing entity. And 3, to provide 3 names to be submitted to the governor for consideration for board appointment. And I thank you very much for listening to me.
We have a few questions from the jury. Senator Mount, if you would. Ms. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I don't have a question, Willie. I just want to say that I think this is needed so badly. As you are aware, special ed is my area, my professional area. And after I retired from teaching, I had the opportunity to work with adults. And there are so many services that's needed, and I think this will be a great benefit. I support it wholeheartedly, and I just wish so much of success, because it is not the American way for us to live our daily lives when we have such a great need for those individuals with special needs, because they're an active part of our lives. And for that, they're worthy. They deserve whatever help we could give them. So I support that, and I know you're not going to have a problem with it, and I so wish you will. I get all kinds of information and publications because of my membership in different organizations that keeps me abreast. But Calcasieu Parish is in dire need of services for people with special needs. I just want to share that information with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your
thank you for your efforts.
Thank you for your
Thank you, Ms.
comment.
Griffin. Mr. Stelling.
The funding for this district that has now been turned over to the parish, where is the funding going to come from for this?
As been explained to us, that's a good question. The monies will still come from the state. The focus is more that the responsibility in the decision-making process will be more efficient because it will be within the local entity or the LGE. And so once we initiate the letter of intent and then you begin the process, it's very carefully written out, and we're happy to provide that for you. But the point being, within that process, the LGE will sign a contract with the state, with that particular department, outlining all the specifics.
So when the budget cuts come from the state and down the road, and this is going to happen?
It's already happening.
Yeah. So when that happens, where does the difference come from?
That's a good question, and I know that of the 4 districts that are already organized and up and running, because they started a lot sooner, they've already been impacted by the cuts. Is that right?
We all have.
Yeah, we've all been impacted by the cuts, and those districts have as well.
And this means how many more people, or how many people are going to actually have to be hired for this?
There will be only 1 that will be hired by the board
That's
that you all will participate in. Yes.
That is a salary position.
You want to answer that, Carly?
Also, I believe the law allows up, I think it's $200,000 for each district to function. So they'll be able to pay their travel expenses, pay for the salary of the executive director, and the various other operating costs that are associated with the board.
Thank you, Mr. Stelling. Mr. Size.
Yes. I also want to say that I very much am in support of this this district this endeavor. Each district, What 5 parishes are, I don't have that information.
The 5 parishes would be Cameron, Calcasieu, Jeff Davis, Allen, and Beauregard. So kind of the, the 5, Region 5 parishes that generally we're all together in that regard. So that would be the common 5.
So where, and it would be located, where would the office,
I would guess that LEG would make those kinds of determinations.
Okay, so they have made that determination.
Right.
So the 3 at large are going to come from, also going to come from this same district, but we're going to turn in the names.
That's right. So each of the police jury of groups from each parish would actually submit names to the governor.
And how long will it be before they plan on getting it off and running?
I would guess that from the standpoint of the governor's appointments, it is something they really want to see happen. So I don't think there'll be a great delay in the appointment of those 3 positions. However, do keep in mind that if you're nominating 3 and 4 other parishes are nominating 3, the time to process all those reviews or resumes and make that careful consideration, because it does, one is very specific as to those 3 appointments. One represents either a consumer, I think, one represents one with financial or legal, financial experience. So it's very specific on the 3 that you'll consider to nominate. You'll have guidance in that regard. What I wanted to say a little bit earlier, maybe between you and Mr. Stelly, is that the driving force is, which is quite apparent to you because you all do it, very well as a police jury, and that is, serving the public the most efficiently and effective way we can, particularly this particular group of consumers where it's obvious that as far as effectuating change, it would be much quicker and better because it is controlled within a local or LEG, in my mind anyway. So we're really pleased by that and hope to see great results. We know that other districts have, in fact, that have been established for 2 or 3 years, are seeing great success.
Thank you, Mr. Size. Mr. Scott.
Yeah, once again, I'm totally behind this, and I love having local government using, local funds from the state. One question I have is on the districts that are already put together that are functioning, you're saying showing great, strides. How are they funded? What kind of money are they receiving already?
They're funded very similarly to the regions that are operating under the Department of Health and Hospitals. Their funding is very similar. It's right in line with the rest of the regions.
Can you give me
and
a
it's
number?
Based on, no, I don't really know their exact budget, but it's probably, 15 million, 14 million, something like that for the capital area. Might even be 17, I'm not sure. It's somewhere in there. There is not a local match. That's just strictly state monies. They do apply for other grants, federal grants and local grants, foundation monies, etc. Some of the districts have millages and operate with support of their local tax dollars, but not all of them do. It's different for each district.
All right. And a year ago, when the crisis intervention team showed up here and they were losing $1 million of state money, this will be the 2nd year in a row that Calcasieu Parish has paid $500,000 just to kind of keep it breathing. Is that money now going to be able from the state to take that system back over, or are we still going to need to match in some of these areas to get them up to the level that, like crisis intervention wants at?
Again, I think the basis of the original fund was federal grant money, if I'm not mistaken. Social service block grant. And so that came into play. And then, of course, this particular parish has always been very willing to collaborate and assist in that regard. So it's monies that started from a grant from the federal government as opposed to the state. So in answer to your question, does the state have money? If things change, no, things have not changed, and we continue to face more deficits this year and next year as well. But let me share with you that, again, the issue is about developing a local board that can make decisions for our local people or impact our local people, as opposed to a financial mandate. So what the governor's trying to do and the Department of Health and Hospitals is to disseminate or make sure that that responsibility and accountability is involving all of our local government folks, or with this LGE, as opposed to, everybody's calling Baton Rouge and why can't we get something done about this particular issue or this particular consumer. That's really where I'm focused, as opposed to, any other angle of it. There's no surprises, and it's not an expectation of our local parishes having to fund or being required to fund, so there's no mandate. We're here asking for your consideration to share with us by helping us form this board, this LGE board, with the other 4 parishes, and that's really the premise today. And then we have a very organized and specific procedure based on the Act that will assist those people, particularly our police jury, for how they go about selecting that particular person that you want to represent Calcasieu.
All right, thank you very much, and I'm behind it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. McMurray.
I just want to make clear one thing. There's only one $500,000 contribution. I'm sure they would be happy for there to be a second one, but as of right now, y'all have approved one $500,000.
Thank you, Ms. McMurray. Mr. Brain.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to go ahead and make the motion to adopt the resolution of support and intent.
We have a motion and a second. We had a motion earlier by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Collins. Is there any other discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 15 passes. Senator Mount, we do thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all for your good questions and listening to what we view to be a very important step. I'd like to close by just requesting, because I know you network with all the other parishes, if you could, whoever you're close to, whether it's the whole police jury from a different parish or an individual, if you would pick up the phone and call them and share with them what you learned tonight, because I know some have been, I think some presentations have already occurred, but there will be others that will occur, and it would just be very helpful to hear from a peer what your position is, that they would, gain knowledge from that and be supportive as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mount. We are in full support of it. Moving on to item number 14, consideration of adopting a resolution approving a cooperative endeavor agreement between the police jury and the Lake Charles Memorial Hospital in conjunction with the Lake Charles Office of Mental Health for the funding assistance in the amount up to $500,000 for the operation of the Crisis Intervention Triage Program. Mr. Beam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Scott kind of led into this already, but just to give a little bit more detail, and Ms. Fry is here also to answer any questions. This is the money that that you informally committed back after the legislative session last year when that federal grant was lost. It is considered to be a one-time, what we call bridge funding grant. I want to commend Senator Mount. I know she's been working diligently to try to work through the state for some monies later that could make this a little more permanent. There's certainly no guarantee, but the idea that there is a consensus with the local advisory task force on this, as well as many of you and some other officials, to try to get this program up and running. The way this is set up, when we worked it to where it is a cooperative endeavor between the police jury and Memorial Hospital, who did the triage program. It's mental health triage, basically, is sort of the words they use for that. It would be the same program, basically, but we're having a separate memorandum of understanding that goes with this, so that you as the police jury are not in any position to try to oversee all the medical reports and everything. That's not really what we do. This is funding assistance. And so the MOU is with the Office of Mental Health, that they basically become your monitor of all of this, and they work directly with the Memorial, which is what they did before. So it puts back into place, for as long as this money lasts, this program, and at the rate that Memorial is able to do it, it's basically going to be about $100,000 a month, so for about 5 months, and hopefully something can happen between now and then. But that's, if you'd like to know a little bit more about the details, Ms. Fry can answer from Office of Mental Health, and I think we do have representatives from Memorial Hospital as well.
Thank you, Mr. Beam. I have a motion by Mr. Sines and a second by Mr. Andrew Point. Is there any other discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 14 passes. Thank you, Mr. Beam. At this time, I have one more presentation I would like to make. Would Mr. Otis Walker please come to the mic? We have somebody that we want to introduce to Calcasieu Parish that's brand new to the area, our new postmaster.
Otis Walker, 2309 11th Street, Lake Charles, Louisiana. Thank you, members of the jury. We, for a long time now, Lake Charles has been without a permanent postmaster. We finally got someone that's willing, that has signed on the dotted line and will be with us for a few years. So she also wants to get involved in the community. And she asked me, she said, Otis, I need to meet some people. And I couldn't think of a better group of people for her to meet than the #1 police jury here in Louisiana. So without further ado, our new postmaster, Mr. Denise Buell. You're a smart man.
Thank you, Ms. Denise.
He needs to be in politics, doesn't he? He's awesome. I'm Denise Buell. I reside where Otis does. No, just kidding. I'm at 921 Moss Street. Again, I'm Denise Buell, the new postmaster. I come from Dallas-Fort Worth, and I have signed on the line, slit my wrist, given them blood, so I will be in Lake Charles for years to come. One of the things that I'm truly trying to get off the ground, and I'm looking for everybody's support, and y'all, as Otis said, are important people with voices that are in the community, and that's what we need. We're trying to do a military support project. We're having a morning breakfast on February the 22nd over at the post office on 921 Moss Street. We invite everybody to please attend. It'll be at 10 o'clock. We have a handout if Otis would be so kind. But what we're going to do is we're going to gather up, you can either contribute, we have a list on the back of items that are acceptable or not acceptable. Pictures of Otis we do not want. But we're going to collect anything for our troops. We're going to collect that through February 22nd through May 15th, and our shipping date is going to be Memorial Weekend. We're going to try and make it a big celebration on Memorial Weekend, and what better way to honor our troops on Memorial Day than to send them 18-wheelers full of goodie bags and boxes. And it's not only money or contributions, people that want to come help and fill out forms, help pack boxes, any kind of help at all would be greatly appreciated. And I know the post office is a large amount of people that have served in the military. We have many that have served their tours in Iraq and Iran and over there. So any help y'all could give and support, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Denise. And if any assistance that we can be as a governing body here, please feel free to contact us at any time.
Thank you, sir.
We have a few comments. Mr. Francis.
Yes, sir.
I have a question here. I was looking down here, and it said each flat rate priority box ships for $12. Are you asking about for $12.50 to help send these packages? Is that what you're basically asking for?
You can either come in and purchase the postage for the box,
Okay.
which Otis has had one of the boxes. You can either come up to the counter and tell the window clerk, and this is only in Lake Charles. Some of you that live in Westlake or Sulphur, I'm not responsible for your postmaster. This is just Lake Charles. You can come to any of the 4 offices in Lake Charles and say, I would like to purchase 4 or 5 boxes. Give them the money, they'll print the strip. If you don't have the $12.50, we have bright red boxes that are going to be on the counter that you can just drop your change in.
I'm going to borrow $12.50 from Mr. Brame.
Just $12.50? I need more
Well,
than
I'm gonna put up
$12.50.
$12.50, so that's
Oh, come on.
Oh, we can do that on 22nd as well as we can?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. And again, we do thank you, Ms. Denise.
Thank you.
Item number 7, take appropriate action on applications for liquor and beer permits. Mr. Vickers.
Mr. President, we have 2 applications. We recommend they both be
So
approved.
moved.
So approved.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Griffin and a second by Mr. Brame. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 7 passes. Item number 8, consideration approval of the minutes
Move
of
on,
the
8.
meeting of the
Second.
Police Jury dated December 17, 2009. I have a motion by Mr. Andrew Point and a second by Mr. Collins. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 8 passes. Number 9 doesn't require any action. We'll move on to number 10. Consideration of the approval of the Ways and Means Committee report dated January 21st, 2010, and take appropriate action on recommendations related to the following items to be considered by said committee. Mr. Brame.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ways and Means Committee met earlier this afternoon and voted unanimously to adopt a resolution for the renewal for the jailhouse and maintenance tax with an increase, and also the replacement of a 1.5% sales tax. These items are for the May 1st, 2010 ballot. It was approved unanimously, and I just want to thank Brian Beam for the great presentation that he gave on it. And that's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Brame. I need a motion
Move
and a
to
second.
receive report.
I have a motion by Mr. Scott and a second
Excuse me, Mr.
by Mr. Brame. Mr. Beam.
We would ask that the jury approve each item separate just because of the type of item this is regarding the election, and that would be it. Okay. If you could, just take each bullet separately.
Yeah, we needed, we voted on them at the Ways and Means Committee separately, so we should vote on them.
We'll go ahead and do 10.1. I have a motion and a second.
10-1.
And 10.2, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Is there any discussion on 10.1? Hearing none, 10.1 passes. 10.2, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objection? 10.2 passes. Thank you. Item number 11, receive report from staff on applications received from the Human Resource Department for the position of Parish Administrator in accordance with procedures set forth by the Police Jury for submittal. Mr. Mark McMurray.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have before you a memorandum from me, as well as attached to that the applications of the 3 individuals who properly submitted the applications in accordance with the procedures that you had approved back in December. We have completed that process that you established for us to set forth up to the point that you had approved that. You have those applications in front of you now, and it would be appropriate, I think, at either at this meeting or at a subsequent meeting to determine the path forward. My understanding of what you had approved in November is that, in December, was that persons submitting applications for the job within the proper procedure that in fact met the base qualifications as spelled out by the job description that you approved, you would consider interviewing those individuals. The 3 resumes and applications attached here are the only 3 that did properly submit their application. I've explained in the memorandum one of the issues that perhaps is an issue regarding the 3rd of those applications, that being Mr. Southgate. It's really for your discussion or your decision regarding the issues that have been raised there. I think anything else I'd say would be redundant over what's already been produced in the memorandum. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Do we have any discussion on item number 11? Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. President. What was it? I guess 2 applications that were not properly filled out. I'm sure if we choose to, we do have access to those. So you still have them on hand?
There were 4 that were not properly submitted in accordance with very clear instructions.
Right.
As it turned out, because they were not properly submitted, they were opened because they were not identified as being applications for the position. Because they were opened, it was evident to see that none of the 4 met the base education qualifications. We have those applications. I think if I were one of those people, I would just as soon not be named because they couldn't fill it out right in the first place. And our position was they really weren't applications because they were not properly submitted. If you want to see them, you can certainly do that. But
I would like to see them. Not necessarily that I wouldn't think that I would consider them, because even I could have filled out the form right, or I think I could have. Maybe I couldn't have, I don't know. But I would like to see him. I don't know if any of the other jurors would. I don't think you need to fax them out or anything like that. I'll come by one day and just take a look at them.
Seems like the main point is that they didn't, whether they submitted it properly or not, they didn't meet the base education qualifications to begin with. So.
I understand. I think my point, whenever we started this, we were picturing maybe we would get 50 or 60 or 70 resumes. We had no idea of how many, and I mean, with the small number, had we known that in the beginning, we probably would have went about it maybe a different way. We could have opened them ourselves with only 4 or 5 of them. It ended up not being as big of a job as what I think we first thought it was going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. I have a question, Mr. McMurray. What was the total number of applications that were received by the Human Resource Department?
We had 3 properly submitted and 4 that did not meet the submittal requirements.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Can I get a motion to receive report?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Mackey and a second by Mr. Hassan to receive report. Is there any other discussion? Any other objection? Receive report on number 11. Item number 12, consideration adopting a resolution authorizing the president of the police jury to execute the appropriate documents related to ratifying and confirming all previous sales made by the police jury on adjudicated property within the municipalities on behalf of the town of Benton, city of DeQuincy, city of Westlake, city of Sulphur, city of Lake Charles, and the town of Iway.
I'll move on 12. But after that, I'd like to go back to 11. I think there's some more discussion.
Second on 12.
All right.
Had a motion on the floor.
Okay. Can I get a motion on item number 12? Yeah. I have a motion by Ms. Griffin and a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Collins. All right, we'll go back to number 11. Mr. Landry?
There were some other jurors.
There was some other discussion on number 12?
Mr. President, correct me
Mr.
if I'm wrong. Thank you, sir. I think it would be appropriate, unless someone on the jury disagrees, that we actually set a date and time for the interview process. Okay. And that would be my suggestion. So I move to discuss.
Okay. Okay, let's vote on number 12. Is there any discussion on number 12? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 12 passes. Back to number 11. Mr. Antrapont.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's ironic, Mr. Spell, that you bring this up. I just asked my colleague here to my left. I didn't think I missed anything, but I think it would be appropriate that we'd set some time of whatever's convenient with the applicants. I think would probably be more appropriate than us telling them when to come meet with us. That's just my suggestion to you, but that's a good move. We do need to set some dates for interviews, absolutely. Thank you.
Is there any time that you guys want to set times as to when we can meet or discuss this matter any further? Because we're up for discussion right now.
I don't know what the applicant.
Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And one of the things I want to kind of mention to this jury is, as we go into these interviews too, we've never really interviewed anybody before, and there's some process and probably some questions that would put us in hot water if we ask them or ask them wrong on different things and getting into some personal things that we may want to know. I think we might need a little coaching on how to conduct the interview process exactly before we do something that is out of line with any of these guys. It looks like we have 3 qualified. I think we all know who they are, and it's just a matter of we need to move forward with this as quickly as possible and make sure we do it as properly as possible. And with that being said, I'll turn it back over to the jury for more discussion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McMillan. Would Ms. Heiser please come to the mic, please? She's our Director of Human Resource, and maybe she can help us a little bit more on what it is that we need to do as a governing body. Please state your name and your position with the parish, Ms. Heiser.
Cheryl Heiser, Director of Human Resources, and there certainly are some questions you can't ask legally. And we can probably provide that don't ask list to you pretty easily. We can also, if you're interested, develop a questionnaire, interview questionnaire of open-ended type questions that you might want to ask the applicants. But we can provide whatever you want us to.
Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Did I understand you correctly, Mr. Andrew Pond? But maybe I did or didn't, I don't know. We need to decide the time, and if the person's interested in the job, they need to be there at the time that we set. If it was me applying for it, I'm pretty sure I'd make it my business to be here if it was.
That's not what I said.
Okay, I misunderstood you then.
What I said was we probably should consult the people we're going to interview and find out what's convenient for them. That's just my opinion.
That is what I understood. I wouldn't, when I interview someone, I make sure it's convenient for me. And if they want the job, then they come at the appropriate time. And
I'm not going to argue with you. That's just my opinion.
It's going to be hard enough to get all 15 of us there together. That's going to be whenever we can, the appropriate time that can come together, they're just going to have to be there. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Wait, Mr. Answer Point.
Thank you. I'm going to address Mr. McMurray. Some of us at one time did go through an interview when we selected the now present registrar of voters. I don't remember what the criteria was on the table that we used to do that, but it worked very well. Now, am I saying we need to do that? No. I'm just saying that we could use that possibly as a benchmark and I don't have a problem being told what questions I can't ask because I know things are different now than they were several years ago. But I'm just going back for those, Dr. Mackey, you were here, and I don't remember who all was here, but that process went very well. Well, of course, I think there was about 150 people that applied for that job at the time. And then we narrowed it down, the committee narrowed it down to however many, 10 or whatever it was, and we went from there. But I guess I'm looking for a point of view as to what we could use from that experience that we got from that.
My recollection is I don't remember whether the full jury conducted the interviews or whether it was a committee that conducted those and then made a recommendation. I think what y'all discussed in December was that you wanted to do it as a full jury.
Right.
Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I would agree with Mr. Landry that, I think at least one of the recommendations I made in the memorandum was that you set a special meeting. You with only 3 to interview, that could actually be accomplished in an afternoon, and I think it would just be a matter of setting that special meeting. The other thing is all 3 of the applicants are local, so it's not a matter of someone having to travel from elsewhere to get here. You set the times and for the interview and go through the interview process. At that point, and that of course can be done in an executive session, and then the decision for you would be upon completing the interview process would be to either continue in executive session at that particular time to discuss the applicants after the interview, or to either recess the meeting and reconvene it at a later date after people have had a chance to digest what they've heard or whatever. That's a process that maybe you don't necessarily decide up front. You may be very clear after interviews, and you could go forward with the decision. My encouragement to you would be to make that process, to take that process up very expeditiously, so as to get the show on the road. But you're right, Mr. Landry-Pond. I think the difference there was I think it was done by committee and a recommendation came, but I think y'all have already kind of crossed that bridge and decided that it was going to be, the interviews would be conducted by the full jury. The proper way to do that, I think, would be to call a special meeting, convene the meeting of the police jury, and then go forward with the statutory process to go into executive session and move on with the interviews. I had suggested in a memo that we maybe look at that next week as either a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday afternoon. Another possibility would be to do it earlier on committee night, which is Thursday. If you did it on Tuesday or Wednesday and you wanted an extra day to reconvene the meeting on Thursday before committees to go ahead and go forward with a decision, then you could do that. It just kind of depends on whether you think you would like to just get it all done in one day, interview and decision make. That's entirely up to y'all's judgment.
Mr. Stilly.
No, my comment was going to be what Mr. Landry said. Thank you.
All right, Mr. McMillan.
Just kind of back to it, in our memo that we just got with the applications tonight, in that paragraph 4, it does have the date suggested. I like the timeline that we have suggested in this. If y'all want to go ahead and kind of look at that and maybe stay with that timeline of next week, and we can move forward with that. I would like, Ms. Heiser, for you to get us that information on questions we shouldn't ask, because I don't know, and I want to make sure that we don't get ourselves in troubles in the interview. And from what I understand, and what you're saying, Mr. McMurray, if I could address you just a moment, convene the meeting, and then we as an entire jury can go into executive session and all be present to do that interview in executive session on all 3 of these candidates at separate times.
That's correct. And the fact that it would be a special meeting, because it would be a special meeting of the jury as compared with a committee, you could, at the point of the interview completion and discussion thereon, come back into regular session and actually take action, because it would be a special meeting of the jury. You could also have the option of recessing that meeting and then reconvening it the next day or at another time to take the final action. But because it's a special meeting and not a committee, you have the ability to actually vote on final action.
Thank you, Mr. McMurray. I just would like to see us go ahead and move forward with this. It's not that many applicants. I think we could knock it out pretty quickly, either Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever most fits this jury, to have that meeting scheduled, to go ahead and get it in the press, to make sure they know exactly what we're doing, what our timeline is, and then we could move forward with that. And that would be something we'd look at. Mr. House is kind of the time of the day that we'd do it. Maybe we'd start at 4 o'clock, just to get a little early if that's convenient to this group. So we're maybe doing it between 4 and 6 o'clock hour, and could possibly get all that done at the same time. So I'll let other jurors that may have questions speak at this time, but that's kind of what I think would be a good timeline for us to get on. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. Spell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like the motion that we set interview times on January 26th, Tuesday, at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 6 o'clock for the 3 candidates. I propose that motion to the floor. Thank you.
Second.
I'll second it.
I have a second on that. Is there any discussion on that motion? Any objection? That'll be the time set for it. Sorry, Mr. Landry. You've got the floor, Mr. Landry. I didn't mean to overlook you.
Okay, I'll let that one go. Since you're on crutches and everything. Who did it first? How'd that go again? Hal did it first? Okay. I'll just leave that alone.
We won't get into that, Mr. Landry.
Just, we need to make sure that we interview Mr. Beam first. That's what we said we were going to do. If you would add that as part of it.
No objections.
Okay. Also, just as a point of clarification, Mr. McMurray, would Ms. Heiser be present with us in the process of doing this on those days that we?
It's entirely up to y'all who to have present. I would say at a bare minimum, Mr. Smith should be there. At a bare minimum.
Legal counsel, Mr. Allen, we would like for you to be present for those interviews. Thank you. Mr. Spell?
I was just going to add to my motion to request Mr. Smith and Ms. Heiser be present during the interview process.
Very well. All right, is there any other discussion? Okay. Mr. Hassan.
I'd like, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and set the times. Mr. Beam for 4 o'clock. Just Mr. Southgate for 5 o'clock. And I don't have the other gentleman's name right in front of me. Actually,
Mahoney.
for
5 o'clock.
What's left? 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock.
4, 5, and 6 o'clock are the times that are on the floor right now. Are those times acceptable? Mr. McMillan.
I do see one of the applicants here, Mr. Mahoney. Would that be okay with you at that time? I mean. And Mr. Bring him to the microphone. I don't.
Mr. Mahoney, would you mind coming to the mic, please? Thank you.
And is Mr. Southgate here?
Would you mind stating your name and address for the record, please?
Greg Mahoney, 2205 Constance Lane, Lake Charles.
And my question was, we were looking at setting this meeting, and of course, we want to be conducive to the applicants of some sort. If actual, you're going to be in Atlanta, that would be too good. Are you going to be back Wednesday?
Yes, I'll be back Tuesday night.
I wouldn't have any problem moving it to Wednesday to accommodate that application, and then we'll just, Mr. Southgate wasn't here to speak on his behalf, so I'm glad you were here to speak up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. McMillan, I appreciate it.
I'd ask Mr. Spell if you would move that to Wednesday.
I have no objections to amend.
And
Okay,
you
Mr.
want the
Spell
5 o'clock or
recommended.
6 o'clock hour? We'll give you first preference because you're, I would say, hey, you're here. What you want? 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock it is, Mr. Mahoney. We'll look forward to seeing you. Ms. Griffin?
I would ask.
Trying to see who's conducting the meeting, Mr. McMillan or you, but now that I'm kind of straight with that. So does that mean we're going to have 2 days that we show Tuesday and Wednesday, or are we going to reschedule them all for Wednesday? Everything will be scheduled for Wednesday? Okay, thank you.
Everything will be on Wednesday.
Thank you, President.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney, for being here. Mr. Scott?
My question are we going to reconvene the special meeting on Thursday before our regular meeting in order to discuss? Or are we just going straight into the regular meeting with a decision?
Anybody got any comments on that? Floor is open for discussion. Mr. Landry?
I'll comment. I mean, I won't know that until I get through with the interview. I doubt that I'll be prepared to make a decision that quick. I want to think about it for a little bit.
We gotta think about it.
Maybe I'm just slow, but it takes me a little time to digest all three. I'm gonna have to sit in there for 3 hours.
I agree with him.
Okay, so we'll just wait on that, and we'll move that whenever the time is right for us to discuss it and move forward on it, if that's okay.
Thursday.
All right. Okay.
Are we agreeing to have a special meeting, reconvene?
Yes, we
Or
are,
a
Mr.
regular
Sires.
meeting
Nothing
on
will be decided on Thursday of that week, no. But we are going to meet with the applicants on Wednesday. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to
Ellis?
make a motion that at a minimum, we set it for February 4th, just to keep our timeline.
I would second that motion.
All right, I have a motion on that time being set for February 4th by Mr. Hassan and a second by Mr. Andrew Point. Is there any discussion? Okay. Mr. McMillan?
And the February 4th would be the last date to make a decision. We could make it, I'm telling you guys, if we go into these interviews and we have the votes for the candidate that we want to see in there, then that decision could be made Wednesday afternoon. It could be made Thursday. I don't see we put restrictions on it. Once you get to the 8 votes, then that person is the person that's going to be hired. So I don't see us putting restrictions on when exactly we're going to do it, other than, like you're saying, a deadline, a kind of a drop date to make sure we have it done by.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as restrictions on when we make that decision, I don't think there should be. If we want to do it Wednesday, we do it Wednesday. If we want to do it Thursday at the regular meeting, we do it then. But we're up here to make decisions, and then when it's right in our heart to make a decision, we can move forward with that.
All right, Mr. McMillan. I don't think there was a deadline actually set on that day, February 4th. I just think that it needed to be done by that time. So within that time, I mean, if decisions are made by then, we'll move forward on it, definitely. Mr. Ellis.
Thank you. And I'll ask either Mark or Alan to comment on this. We have to set this meeting. We can't just vote on committee night as a full jury.
Actually, the reason I suggested the special meeting and a recess and a reconvention is that you would not need to have the notice of when you reconvene. You wouldn't have to, it wouldn't be a separate meeting. You could reconvene. You would have the option that if at the conclusion of the interviews you know what you want to do and you reconvene at that time from executive session, you can take action. Otherwise, you simply would recess Wednesday evening after your interviews, and you have the freedom at that point to reconvene that meeting whenever you choose to do that, to finish those actions. You could do that the next day, even though the next day is committee night, but you could set a reconvening of that meeting for 5 o'clock on a 5:30 committee night. The way committees structure, they fall whenever you're ready to have them. We generally begin them at 5:30, but as you know, Ways and Means, when it follows Public Works, it just starts whenever Public Works is over, so it doesn't have to be at 5:30. So you have the ability to reconvene that special meeting when you're ready to do it. Does that answer?
I guess what I'm saying is, we can't decide that Wednesday night.
Yes, you could, because it would be a special meeting, and
We could reconvene it the next night.
You'd have to advertise, wouldn't it?
We don't.
No. Once you call a meeting to order as a special meeting, the jury can take any action that was placed on the agenda. And so if you're, so you could do that either Wednesday night, or you could simply, instead of adjourning the meeting Wednesday night, when you complete the interviews, you would make a motion to recess the meeting. It would be seconded, and you would approve it, and you would set when you were going to reconvene the meeting.
Thank you.
So it's a continuation of that. The minutes that would from that meeting, Kathy would prepare those. It would be like it was a single session.
My concern was just what Mr. Andropont said, the advertising of it and having it set. So we're in good shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Mr. Andropont.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make sure that at some point in time, we as an elected body will have gotten together before the 4th to discuss and go over the 3 applicants that we have interviewed. Now, I don't know how you do that, but what I'm saying is I don't want to bring all these discussions and what we're going to discuss in executive session. I think that what we have to do is basically, from my point of view, and correct me where I'm wrong, is we should have a consensus.
Well, I think what you do is whenever you're ready to have that discussion, you would reconvene the special meeting. You would go into executive session, which is it is eligible to go into executive session to discuss the professionalism or competence of any person, and you can do that, and you can go forward with that discussion. You can't take action in there,
right?
But you can go forward with the discussion, and then you would come out of that executive session, and a motion would be made, and action would be taken.
Answers my question. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Andropont. Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I forgot, but I'm going to be out of town on like the 3rd to the 5th or something like that on some police jury business. So I won't be here on the 4th. But Brame said he doesn't care. Of course, we may.
My understanding,
one
Mr.
vote
President,
won't matter.
was
I don't think.
that was set as an outside date. That was not. You were not setting that in order to take action on the 4th. You're saying it would have to be done by the 4th.
We have that option that you said. So.
Right.
Where are you going?
Seattle. Okay.
All right, Mr. Landry, thank you. Mr. McMillan.
One other small correction. As I said, and we all know that with 15 of us, 8 votes can dictate what this jury does, but I hope on this decision, all 15 of us are on the same page and that we get the right person for this job. And so with that being said, I hope it's a unanimous vote, not 8 out of 7, and somebody going into this job with those type odds on their head. But anyhow, with that, we will do the interviews, and I think we'll do a great job in it, and I appreciate that, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Is there any other discussion?
Just one comment, Mr. President, if I could, and that's exactly why I was concerned about us going in executive session to discuss the issues that are from the applicant's point of view. That's a good point, Al.
Thank you, Mr. Andropont. I have a motion by Mr. Ellis to set that date, and a second by Mr. Francis. Mr. Andropont. Is there any other discussion? Any other objection? Hear none. Item number 12 passes. Item number 13, consideration adopting a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals of statements of qualification for local established nonprofits to develop low to moderate income elderly and workforce housing through title conveyance of Louisiana Land Trust properties located in Calcasieu Parish. I have a motion by Mr. Andropont, a second by Ms. Griffin. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none. Item number 13 passes. Item number 14 was taken up earlier, and also item number 15 was taken up earlier. Item number 16, consideration of adopting a resolution approving the renewal of the lease agreement between the police jury and the Calcasieu Parish Employee Federal Credit Union for office space on a portion of the 3rd floor of the Magnolia Building. I have a motion by Mr. Fordham. I have a second by Mr. Landry. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 16 passes. Item number 17, consideration adopting a resolution approval of calling an election to be held on May 1st, 2010 by the Board of Commissioners of Ward 4, Fire Protection District Number 4, for the renewal levy of collections of a property
So moved.
ad valorem tax in the amount
Second.
up to 8.65 mils for a period of 10 years beginning January 1st, 2011. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Dr. Mackey. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 17 passes. Item number 18, consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing changes to the Housing
President.
Department of Section 8 Administrative Plan.
Mr.
I
President.
have a motion by Mr. Collins and a second by Mr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Any objection? I have discussion. Mr. Stelly.
Can someone explain exactly what that, I know I got something on my fax machine, I just read it briefly. What exactly is that owners or family debt to the PHA? What exactly is
Would Mr. Terry please come to the mic? Mr. Terry, please state your name and position with the parish.
Tarek Pali, Coordinator of Federal Programs. Mr. Stelly, it's individuals who actually owe money to the Housing Department.
So that, you mean just from lack of paying their rent?
It could result from an overpayment where we may have overpaid for some reason, and we're trying to recoup those funds from either a owner or from a program participant.
Okay. So this could also be the property owner, you're saying,
Can be.
that was overpaid?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is that all, Mr. Stelly?
No, yeah,
Go ahead.
never mind, that's fine. Thank you, Terry, thanks.
Mr. Size.
Yes, Mr. Pulley, the PHA and the HAP, well, some of the acronyms, I'm trying to help me out with some of that.
PHA just simply stands for Public Housing Agency, which in this case would be the Calcasieu Parish Housing Department, and HAP stands for Housing Assistance Payment, which just means the subsidy that we've paid.
And so the changes that we're looking at is actually it's just you're changing the dollar amount that the certain amount of it would be turned over to the Department of Housing.
That's correct.
And the other part would be taken on by the Housing Authority. Is that correct?
Basically, what we're doing is that if someone is in a position where they owe the Housing Authority, or in this case, the Calcasieu Parish Housing Department, if the amount exceeds a certain amount, in this case, it would be $2,000, it will be referred to HUD for disposition. Currently, we're handling those internally.
Okay.
And so we're changing our procedures where now we would just simply refer them to HUD.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. Okay, thank you very much, Janice.
Thank you, Mr. Size. Mr. Stelly.
Terry, those charges, is that criminal charges or are those civil charges?
We'll have to defer to Mr. Smith.
Mr. Guidry, Mr. President.
Good, Mr. Allen Smith,
Let me
legal
talk
counsel.
just a little bit. A perfect example is I am handling a collection right now from a man who had a house that he rented. That rental proceeds went straight to him from the federal government. Problem is that due to a computer glitch, he got about twice as much per month than he should have gotten. Of course, he didn't say anything. Well, we discovered that problem, and he owes that money back. So we're handling it internally. Tarek and I are handling that. It is basically a civil matter because it is the recovery of funds paid that were not deserved.
Although there's no law to protect the individual with the rent house, though.
The people who were in the house are not responsible anyway.
But if they were in there for if there was a case for non-payment rather than overpayment,
it was still, in my opinion, it would be civil unless there is some criminal imposition made by the federal law. We're going at it as a civil matter.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you asked some of my questions, Mr. Stilley. But Tarek or Mr. Smith, whichever one would answer this, for example, if an error was made in the billing or overpayment to these individuals, would they lose their certificate or voucher, or would the federal government, would HUD, hold back that amount of money that is due and let them keep their voucher, or would they have to move, or how would they handle that? And I'm concerned too about some of those individuals who may owe, that will not be able to repay that money.
It's a very good question. In this case, the changes that we're proposing, the individual would lose their assistance. They would lose the voucher.
They would lose the voucher because of an error that was made that wasn't their fault?
Well, in this particular case, we're primarily referring to situations where the person has committed fraud.
Okay. So from the facts that I received from you, those individuals that you're concentrating on, those individuals, they've broken the law.
That's correct.
Okay.
They've committed fraud.
Had I known that, then I wouldn't have had to ask a question. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Any other objections? Mr. Scott.
I have one question, since we've already brought up the subject. Out of the people that are paying, you know, how much money is not being paid, basically, I'm asking you? Not the fraud, but the other end. Do you have a amount of people that owe?
Well, most of the cases that we're referring to are fraud cases, and we do know that about half don't pay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any other discussion? Any other objection? Hearing none. Item number 18 passes. Thank you, Mr. Berry-Polique. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Item number 19.
Move on 19.
Consideration approving a following request of the Office of Juvenile
Move on 19 on
Justice
bullet.
Service. Is that on both bullets, Mr. Size? Okay, 19-1 and 19-2. Let me just go over 19-1. Adopt a resolution approving a joint service agreement between the Police Jury, Office of Juvenile Service, and the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office, the Lake Charles Police Department, the Westlake Police Department, the Iowa Police Department, the Suffolk Police Department, the Vin Police Department, the DeQuincy Police Department, and the McNeese University Police Department for the implementation of Calcasieu Parish Strategic Plan. I have a motion by Dr. Mackey and a second by Ms. Griffin. Is there any discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none. Item number 19 passes. Item number 20, consideration adopting a resolution approving a cooperative endeavor between the Police Jury, Mosquito Control Department, and the City of New Orleans, East Baton Rouge Parish, Mosquito and Rodent Control, St. Tammany Mosquito Abatement, District Number 2, and the Tangible Hold Mosquito Control. I have a motion by Ms. Griffin and a second by Mr. Size. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none. Item number 20 passes. Item number 21, consideration adopting a resolution authorizing advertising of oil and gas and mineral release on certain tracts of parcels in land containing 8.62 tracts or more or less. I have a motion by Mr. Collins and a second by Mr. Fordham. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 21 passes. Item number 22, take appropriate action on a request of qualification received by the parish purchasing agent on January 13, 2010 for home leveling service by
Move on
the
22.
Division of Planning and Development. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Mr. Fordham. Mr. Vickers.
Mr. President, members of the jury, just want to kind of give you a little update. Basically, we have qualified 6 companies to do this work. It's elevation work to raise homes and so forth. We may get more interest from other companies, and we'd also like permission in the event that they can meet the qualifications if there are additional companies over and above these 6 companies that we'd be allowed to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Is there any other discussion?
Need a motion? I don't have any problem in adding that to that motion. If we got other qualified companies.
All right.
Second doesn't mind, whoever
Okay.
second. I would go with that.
All right, then, Mr. McMillan, we'll have that added. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. Item number 22 passes. Item number 23, take appropriate action on bids.
Move on 23.
Purchasing agent on January 20, 2010 for the Calcasieu Parish Project number 2010-01. We have 3 bids that were turned in by R.E. Height, Set Development, and Prairie Construction. Agenda note, the parish engineering recommend that the low bid in the amount of $3,276,779.25 of R.E. Height construction company be accepted. Is there any discussion? I have a motion by Mr. Andrew and a second by Ms. Griffin. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none. Item number 23 passes. Item number 24, consideration of authorizing the parish administrator to advertise for bids for the construction of the audiology suite addition to the Calcasieu Parish Health Unit. I have a motion by Dr. Mackey, a second by Ms. Griffin. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item number 24 passes. Item number 25, consideration of authorizing the parish administrator to advertise for bids for the shoreline protection project at Intercoastal Park. I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Hassan. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Ms. Griffin.
Thank you. Question, sir. Thank you. What will this shoreline protection project consist of, Alan? Can you answer that?
Mr. Allen.
Yes, ma'am. I'd be glad to. If you're familiar with the Calcasieu Point landing that we opened southtown, it's a similar project to that where we take the shoreline, and in this case, Intercoastal Park's on the Intercoastal Canal. It's a very steep bank that you can't actually fish from that well or access the water. This project will be designed to provide more fishing access to that waterway. And it's just going to be some step-down concrete matting that the grass should ultimately grow through and should work really well. It's working well at Calcasieu Point, and it's in a sort of a duplication of that effort.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Mr. Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is also funded by 100% by a grant. Is that correct?
It's $1 million. I'm not sure that it's going to be 100%.
Okay.
Obviously, this is authorizing us to advertise for bids, so I hope it's 100%.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Is there any other discussion? Any objection? Hearing none. Item number 25 passes. Number 26, consideration of authorizing the parish purchasing agent to advertise for bids for 4 1/2-ton pickup trucks and a boat and trailer for the use of mosquito control department. I have a motion by Mr. Fordham. I have a second by Mr. Collins. Is there any discussion?
Question.
Any objection? Mr.
Question.
McMillan.
Old motor and trailer, maybe? That boat's not going to have a motor on it?
I would ask Mr. Terracina to come forward if you really want.
Pardon me?
Mr. Terracina can come forward and answer that question if you'd
A
like.
canoe or something, Mr. Terracino? You going to hand paddle that thing? Might
Mr.
ought
Lewis,
to put a
please
motor
come
on it.
forth and state your name and position with the parish, please.
Lucas Terracina, director. A couple of years ago, our old motor blew out, so we bought a new one, a motor 2 years ago. Now we need to replace the boat and trailer.
Thank you. I was just want to make sure you had a motor on that
Oh, yeah,
boat.
we got it.
Thank you.
Were you going to donate that, Mr. McMillan?
I'm just checking with him.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, all right. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any objection? Item number 26 passes. Item number 27, consideration of authorizing the parish purchasing agent to advertise for bids for 1 2010 3/4-ton pickup truck for the use by the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. I have a motion by Mr. Fordham and a second by Mr. Landry. Is there any discussion? Is there any objection? Okay. I have a point of personal privilege by Mr. Spell. Mr. Spell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just going over all these bid items, I would just like to ask if staff could give the jury at our next meeting an update on the bid process for the 901 building renovations. And I would just like to make that request.
Okay, Mr. Spell, we'll do that. Mr. Scott.
I would just like to recognize Mr. Farnham. He's done such a great job tonight, and he's even got a tie on, so he looks just like he fits in that spot. So I just wanted to commend him on the job well done tonight.
Mr. Farnham.
Mr. Scott, I just wanted to mention we are a class act.
I understand that.
Ms. Griffin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Just a keen observation. I think Mr. McMillan is dangerous being out of that president's seat because he ran your meeting just about tonight. Thank you, sir.
I ask for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion and a second. Meeting is now adjourned.